so we can see the QC tool page. So as you guys know, the QC tool was down. I think it's either back up or it's being worked on. Trevor could speak more to that than I could at the moment. But just want to thank Trevor for volunteering to lead this session for part one of exploring the QC tool. I really hope you guys get some good information out of it. Maybe you learned something that you didn't learn before. There will be a part two around the middle of March. Might have to shift the date, but we do have a part two scheduled as well. So without further ado, Trevor, if you wanna get started, you wanna jump in?
Thanks, JT. Thanks for sharing. So I've already logged in, which is why I'm not sharing at the moment. What's coming through, what you see on the screen at the top, do you see this login with SAML? Well, there's a new security feature. So this March 17th is a deadline to where this old format of username and password is going to change. Everyone is going to have to click on that login with SAML and something about creating a ticket and doing a couple IT things. I just got the email a day or two ago, so I'm still absorbing it. I haven't done it myself. So the only reason I bring it up here with 30 plus people is to know that we'll all need to work through this transition to ensure that the QC tool is up and running. Dean experienced an issue yesterday. Buddy, I think you reached out with one. So it's just the pains of, I think this is the start of that process. And certain things behind the scenes are getting toggled on and off with permissions. And please just be patient. More to follow in emails and maybe some line managers or something helping just get this information disseminated so we can make it clean on what that looks like to even log in with the SAML prompts. So that's all I wanted to share with that. Any questions at the moment with that?
I'm good, brother.
It should work until March 17th, right? It should be working, but if not, you just need to reach out and we'll get with Jerry or whoever it needs to be and get you fixed.
My understanding is once you have it set up, if you're on the VPN, it's just like going to Concur or your email or anything else. You just click on that login with SAML and you don't have to enter anything. It just takes you right to it. But if you're not on the VPN, then you got to go through the Global Protect thing and enter the code just like you would if you're trying to get in Concur and you were not on the VPN.
And is that functionality live right now? If I click the login with SAML?
I believe so.
I mean, we can test it. I'm on the VPN, so.
Yes.
But you have to be set up though.
You're right. I'm not authorized, so there it is. Travis on the point.
There you go. Thanks for testing it. See, I don't even know enough to really speak to it. That's why I personally wanted to go through the process before I could really help others. It was more of a FYI that things are changing in the upcoming weeks.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll stop sharing now.
I'll start sharing and we'll try to jump into something. While my screen is coming up and people can see bread files, does anyone want to chime in and maybe spend a couple minutes? I think it's worth trying to define as a group what's quality versus quality control versus quality assurance, which are three terms that are thrown out a lot in this community. So anyone want to give a stab at it? What they think the difference is, or go for it, buddy.
I think quality control is the first check, which like what y'all are doing, and then a quality assurance is to come back behind it and assure that both the assessor's quality is there and the quality control is doing the right work to help and control the process and the learning of what's going on with for the assessor as it goes.
Thank you.
Close enough.
Well, I mean, I don't have the definition. It's an open question. Anyone else?
When I think of a difference between the two, quality control is more internal, making sure we turn in a good quality product. Quality assurance is an independent review. So in our contracts, quality assurance is the golden wool for somebody outside of us. But I would say an independent review is that quality assurance.
That's
Okay.
exactly how I was trying to explain it and look at it as well, Mr. Anthony. That was
Yeah, I
what my
agree.
explanation was going off of, right?
No, yeah, I think you're right. Appreciate it.
And then, I mean, I'm not using AI, but I tried to do some quick Google searches. I think we're all responsible for just the general term quality, right? And then trying to define what is quality. I think I see quality control is obviously what we're about to dive into, this tool that helps us all be consistent and have something to speak to. All in preparation to present data, a final product to the client. And then, as Anthony was sharing, quality assurance is a term that I associate with Golden Wolf, these third parties that are built into contracts that come in and review our processes. So I think I picked up on a systematic process, right? So it's even bigger, a bigger picture. I'd seen the three little circles, and I kind of saw that as quality versus control is the next bubble bigger, and then assurance is even this broader concept and term. So it's what we're aiming for, and that's what I see the QC tool as being all about. So before I open a QC tool, I don't want to spend much time on the website. We all know what it is. A couple little things to pick up. We know about the downloadables. For those that may not know, you drag and drop the file. You do not always have to drag and drop a bread file and a bread package. There are separate windows for you to do that, but just understand that if you only attach a bread file, the output will not be able to produce any stored procedures or hits that are testing to ensure that you're attaching photos in the correct spots. But in theory, by not attaching a bread package, you could get a quicker QC run if you're at a stage in your process where you're just trying to look at some data and not necessarily photos at that point in time. And then we know about the OK. And the last thing I just wanted to point out, we're used to getting to this screen and then downloading the file. I've talked with Jerry on a few occasions. I would really like for this run again feature to go away, but I'm told that it's not an option. I just want to share with everyone, I would avoid using this. So even though it takes you to the previous screen, it does not clear out the cache or whatever the term is for that data set that you put into the browser that was loaded into the server. So the safest thing you could do is if you do some work where you're not closing out this browser, just hit refresh. It'll take you back to the previous, at which point you're safe to drag and drop that same file with the same file name. So for some of you out there, you know that you were getting this, what we would call ghost data on a subsequent run. And that led to some trying to, not trying, but changing the file name, tweaking it ever so slightly to ensure that that ghost data didn't populate. Is that clear? Helpful?
Yep.
Okay. As you can see, I spent all morning trying to find some miscellaneous files to get this master. So a master file does not exist to where when we make updates, we could put this master file in and then test the QC tool. I like seeing live data. I was trying to pull some recent stuff from the past couple months to get something that produced as many hits as possible to have a conversation. So that's what you see here. Turned into a 13,000 megabyte file. Something interesting to share is anyone, when you open it, it should default to this translation errors page. And what that does is it tells you that if there's any issues that the tool had. Now, it ran to completion. I took an outside data source, one that we're not responsible for, which is kind of how these two items populated, these inspection records that we really don't have any control over. What is interesting is I chose not to attach a bread package, so it's just telling me that, you know, these F-Series checks of missing building photos, inventory, inspection, like it's not going to tell me anything because it had nothing to look for in a bread package. And then lastly, USP scope alignment did not run to completion. So that's telling me that I have a stored procedure across the bottom that did not produce an output because that individual procedure had timed out. If you have questions, I think it's a good time to want to reach out. If you question something, if it's something we can fix in that bread file and then run the file through a second time, if it's a low hanging fruit that it really doesn't matter, it's more of an information piece. This at least gives you a chance to look at it before just jumping into the data and thinking that you're seeing everything.
So where it says scope alignment didn't run to completion, is that, maybe you said this already, but is that a situation where we just need to run it through again? I think scope alignment.
Yeah, so if we wanted to know what scope alignment was, the QC procedure sheet is an information sheet. It is telling us that there are a total of 68 procedures, right? So potentially 68 sheets can populate across the bottom. It's not telling us if it's A1, A2. This is a stored procedure name. I could do scope alignment and see that it's A9. You know what? 95% of the time, no one should experience an issue. The tool runs great. I kind of did this by introducing that outside data source that it couldn't run it to completion. I think it's a case by case basis, JT. I don't have a clean answer. Step one might be to just refresh your screen and try again and see if you get it. It could be a one-off, but my gut tells me if it fails one time, it's going to fail a second. So it requires deeper digging. And if that's not your skill set,
Okay.
I think my comment would be don't ignore it, but start reaching out and asking others of the group that are here to help. Because if it is something wrong with the tool, I want to know sooner rather than later so I can engage the programmers and get that fixed and get that to production so that others don't experience those issues. Most of the time it's rare that I really see errors, but they are there and they're there for a reason. And it's a reason why this is the first sheet that populates when anybody opens a QC report. Don't ignore it. Take a glance at it. Translation summary. No one probably clicks on this. That's fine. It's not really meant for the group. However, if you think that you're seeing false hits and something's not right, if you reach out to me or you want to share with your QCM, my ask is I need this QC run ID, and that's the minimum what I need to be able to engage the programmers so that they can find the data set behind the scenes and we can start digging into it. Also, you'd have to let me know, hey, I'm having an issue with A9. This is the QC run ID. C17, distress words. Something's going on with these. That's starting to point me in the right direction and give me the data without you having to provide me the access file, right? I don't need that. And if this is too much and the file size is not massive, then just close it out and throw out the QC report in an email. Hey, false flags here. Can you look into it? I'm sharing with you that this is where I'll go first to get this QC run ID. And that's how I'll proceed with working with the programmers. The other piece, I don't stay on top of this constantly, but I tried to create a little bit of a transcript so everyone can kind of see and monitor as adjustments are constantly being made, what stored procedure, what was the issue. It's a very loose way of tracking for those that may be interested in some of the updates. Eyes on report, I'll skip over that briefly. Once again, the QC procedures. This lists out all 68 of them. It gives a description from one spot. I will share that as people click throughout these individual stored procedures, the way that this is formatted, this is a referenced sheet. So instead of having to keep up with a description in 2 locations, I only have to focus about making sure that it's right here, and then it'll just carry through to the individual stored procedures, the sheets that populate in the output. Fairly recent, and it appears that it's not being hidden, or maybe it is. I have this column F. I tried to document some of the logic that's in the SQL programming. It's not verbatim, but for those that want to do a little more digging, that don't like this general description, just know that this is here, that this may help provide you a little more insight into what that stored procedure is looking for if it's producing hits. Questions? On point? Go for it, buddy. It's hard for me to monitor that second screen, so if anyone has
I'll
anything,
I'll do it
yeah.
for you. No problem.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, do you want me to just kind of jump in or?
Yeah, I'd like for it to be more back and
Okay.
forth than just me talking the whole time.
Okay. So the thing where you're showing the logic where it's telling you, that's telling you each one of the ones at the bottom, the same thing instead of just reading it in that little box?
Column C, this description is verbatim how it populates in A1, for example.
Okay.
This is the high level, generally speaking, what the check is looking for. For those that want to dive a little bit deeper, they go through the effort. There is now a column F, and obviously I didn't put anything for A1. It is so basic that it's really not that complicated, but how does the tool identify if a panel board is over 800 amps? Well, this is kind of some of that coding or logic, right? We're using a CMC value, not a bunch of text to identify it. Just a different perspective, a different way of looking at it.
A little more info.
Yeah,
like
some
more of
care,
the-
others don't, right?
Got you. Thank you.
Yep,
Can you go to D9?
I can. I can do it 2 ways. I can either scroll or I can
I want to see what it says about
isolate.
D9.
D9, it says nothing. I'm jumping ahead, but I love it, Nancy. D9 is duplicate sectioning. It is something that is on the test development site. It is not on production. So if some of you are not aware, there are 2 websites. Everyone goes to production. This is the BRID quality control tool. However, whenever we're trying to make an update or play with a new store procedure, our sandbox, it looks identical, but at the top you can see this is builder testing. So duplicate sections is one that's on testing. It should not be on production. Perry reached out to me this morning, and it appears that all of a sudden D9 populated on production, but it's not formatted the same way. It doesn't produce, the nice column headers or formatting. So I've already reached out to Jerry, and it's hey, why is D9 showing on production? Because it's just going to add confusion. But
Well, I'm asking because I saw that show up for the first time, not this trip, I think last trip or maybe the one before. And I was like, but there was no explanation at the top. And I kind of went, maybe I did go to translation or summary, or there was something where you had written some notes or somebody wrote some notes about it. So I know it's looking for duplicates, but it's just, anyway, I was okay, but everything, and I went through it anyway, and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I do have floor deck twice in there for certain reasons or something. So I guess what I'm understanding, or what I understood, and I think I actually called Dean about it. I think it was after Aniston, and it was to combine certain things that don't need to be separated or something, possibly. Anyway,
That's it. And for the
Yeah,
group,
we did go through those, Nancy, and they're still working on the logic because there's reasons for things being broken apart that it
right.
may not recognize now. But where you got, wood doors on one FL and they're both rated the same, and they're the same year, why are they a separate section? Those can be combined unless there's some other reason, and that could be in a comment. So I think they're still working on the logic to make that check cleaner.
You're right. And actually, after I talked to you, it made more sense to me. So it was like, okay, so there are certain ones in here where if I've only got a 1-step difference and everything else is the same, I could combine them. And there were other things which was obviously no, you can't for certain reasons. But right. Okay. Thanks.
yeah. So here's D9, and this is an actual output, right? But the conversation is not complete, and the intent's not to bog everyone down right now in it. But a good example is our, for Dane here, we have 3 sections of hand railing, all in building number 1. It's the same component section. The section name is different, but I don't see any indication to a need to separate it based on maybe material. Maybe that's what was the rationale. It's not documented here. I can't see it, but from a high level builder standpoint, all 3 of those sections are G minus. So what's the rule saying that these need to be sectioned out? This is exterior component. This is not sectioned by floor, right? All these little things, at which point the more sections that are created, the more that builder has to manage and generate work for. So this, and then legacy data, those that did rebaseline, old practices, your exterior components sectioned by cardinal direction, windows, doors. That's just a lot of extra stuff that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah,
So the logic,
sectioning
My bad.
better.
and Dana, I'm not calling you out to say my bad. Like, it's just opened up a new perspective in a conversation, and it's not just you. And the other thing is, the reason I'm not publishing it, we're not even considering DCRs yet. So that just further complicates what is the logic for calling it a duplicate or not. Because if one of these is an Amber Plus and the other 2 are G minuses, well, that still doesn't constitute a need to break out the section, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then I start seeing these tiny little quantities. It's more of just a perspective to look at it, to say, oh yeah, the tool picked up on this. These could be grouped. These could be grouped. No, I want to keep these broken out. But as you can see from this data set, it generated almost 4,000 records to bog down, and yet we still have deliverables to meet and things like that. So there's a balance.
Does that tool know also that there are certain things, not so much architecturally, but MEP maybe, that can't be grouped? Or do you just have to, or is it going to say, can't you group these? You know what I'm saying?
It's been a while since I've really thought hard into the logic of where it even currently stands. It does look into, grouping yes or no. It looks at that. Building component, which is sectioning by floor or not. It's looking at some of those aspects so that it's not just a free for all of, hey, this is the same section.
Thanks.
But we're still working on it. As everyone is watching how I navigate, these sheets are massive. If I get to the top, instead of me having to scroll all the way to the left, there are hyperlinks that at least get you back to the dashboard. It throws you to the sheet all the way to the left. I've also learned recently myself, I can right click with my mouse to get the prompt here to be able to jump if I know what stored procedure I need to look at, okay? Also, Matt Lydon supported in here a couple months ago. Everyone should be aware of this now. If not, I apologize, but that's why we're having this. These workbooks are now macro enabled. So anybody that wants to come in here, these are some pre-selected. If you're doing your piece of it and it's legacy data, right? So it's not just a blank slate that the things that you enter are your data. And if you're MPEF and you verify that these are all the systems that you were responsible for, you can hit filter sheets. And it's going to
Nice.
start hiding all these sheets across the bottom that do not apply to you.
That's nice.
And that could be verified by the fact that you can see everything that was hidden that I can turn around and unhide. Or I can come up here and clear all my filters. And then everything's back in play.
Just filters the sheets and not the dashboard, correct?
Filters the sheets, yes, not the dashboard. You said it did. So it's not hiding rows within this sheet. Is that what you're asking?
Correct. That's first thing I noticed is that stays the same. And what happens is the sheets along the bottom, a lot of those go away if there's no hits for your discipline.
So let me play with a simple run real quick. So you can also just select the ones that you want or don't want. So if all we wanted to look at was roofing real quick, I can filter. I'm now, there's still that many sheets that applied to the roofing conversation, but yes, Dean, as you could see this, I didn't see this change at all.
Click on some of those sheets at the bottom and see if it's all roof related.
I just cleared my filters. So there you go. Not only did it hide the other sheets, but when you go to A1, you can see that a filter has already been pre-applied. So A1 applies, and in this case, it applies to a single section. And I can come in here and you still have the freedom to clear filters, right? So as we go back and talk about A1 as a general conversation, this data set has 218 hits. But that feature of the dashboard isolated this, so anybody that needed to look at A1, it's one hit. Yep. And what it doesn't do is it still does not apply a filter to the eyes on review. So this is still an encompass. Actually, it did, didn't it? Here's B30. So it already pre-applied a filter based on the system, at which point you would then have to go into the consolidated errors or start filtering different columns to dive further into what potentially needed to be fixed based on what the tool.
Very cool.
I think that's all the high level stuff, right? There's at this point, there's two ways of starting the process. One is either to focus on an eyes on review sheet, which is the all encompassing sheet that's shown here. The fact that column A is consolidated errors. It's produced based on the section. These are the number of hits, stored procedures that row got hit for. This is a blank column. This is where the free space for QCM is a part of the 2 to the 3 process and reviews that they can provide additional information. I should point out that you should see that the template provided to you is already hiding some columns. So it goes from column B to column H and then column K. You know, the idea being, let's get to the important stuff, the building number, the system, so forth and so on. But anyone has the ability to come up here and unhide and see that the true document provides you with the site number and the site name and the complex, like this high level report information.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I don't care about that. That's why it's hidden. Originally, we did not populate, or I did not hide assessor name, but I do know some out there thought that this was a very smart way to step one, come in here, filter to your name, and that's all you had to be worried about. And the result of that was a lot of QC issues being missed. And this is more of a complication when it comes to legacy data and the fact that you have old inspection events that we weren't responsible for providing recent inspections. And then are you wiping out timestamps using old timestamps or new ones? Like that whole process, and how do you extract the name of who is truly associated with that record of data at that time? So there's shortcomings in populating column C. So it's hidden. I guess at that point, I'll dive into it. So for me, I go back and forth. Some things are easier to review from the eyes on. Other ones, I want to see what A1 is going to tell me, satisfy it there, and process it that way. Maybe I need to know what the description is on the top. But I think for the purposes of here is to go through all these stored procedure. What is A1? A1 is not in scope. Simply put, if we look at a component catalog and we come in here and say, in proposed scope, no, any of these entries will produce a hit on this sheet, no matter what you do. D50-1005 is not in scope. It is not that that panel board should not be in the data. It's suggesting that it needs to go somewhere else. And in this case, it would be D50-1004. For this one, this is about as simple as it gets. Are there any questions with this one? Got nothing. Okay.
That's usually one of the first checks I look at to see if an assessor understands the tool, because those we should never see.
I concur. A2. So some of the A's are very simple. They're very straightforward. Some you hardly ever see anymore. That's why I had to go and find an outside data source. But simply put here, panels over 800 must be captured as switchgear. And we could dive into the manual. I'm hoping this gets me here quick. And this is where we're getting it from. Any panel board over 800 should be inventoried as switchgear. We can't control the fact that there are I think it's important to show some of the history or the details as to where this is coming from. You know, we're not making it up. D50-1004. We can't control the fact that the Army says that this main circuit breaker 1600 and 2000 amp and 1200 amp component type are still in scope. They are. Yet it contradicts itself and says that anything over 800 needs to be captured as switchgear. That's what we've chosen to be consistent with. Therefore, we have a check in place to ensure that if one of those component types is selected, it's going to flag it. And possibly not just the component type, but as you can see, this is also presenting the capacity. So the tool itself is aiming to identify what the capacity, extract the value out, and if that value is in excess of 800, it's going to flag it. Questions, or we good?
Okay, but if there is switch gear that say 600 amps and it says on it, you know, you look at it and you know it's switch gear, it's not a, you know, it's not a panel. then you still capture that as switchgear, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And correct me if I'm wrong out there. That was a accurate yes, wasn't it?
Yep.
Okay, good.
This is the Army, and things are a little ambiguous sometimes, and it's just the way it is. So,
Yep.
No worries.
And then the last little thing is, as I've just come across these things and have a conversation, I like each sheet because each store procedure presents a different series of columns, because each one of these is a slightly different conversation. So A1, you know, it's giving you the component and the building and stuff, so you can easily get to the bread file and identify that section. That's why the section name's in here. Maybe there's a section comment that would help understand, right? I don't have to go somewhere else and dig to try to identify or figure out what's going on. I may get the answer here. Similarly, A2, you get a section name, but as you can see, there is no section comment. It's not relevant. However, capacity number from section details may contribute to the conversation. So that's where I would say that at times these stored procedures get you to the information you need to review sooner.
All right, so
So
what
on
you're
the
saying
eyes-
is,
I'm
what
sorry.
you're saying is if you fix it in one thing, it may still have an issue down the line with something else regarding section name or something?
I don't
Is that
think I
what you're
just said that, but that is, that's,
No, maybe not. Okay.
you
Okay.
are correct though.
Eh,
So,
eh,
so if something hits on A1 and you fix it and you change it to D501004, you've satisfied A1, but only until you were to run that through the QC tool again, do you know that if it's going to check for anything else? The QC tool
r-
stops. If that
Right.
component type is not in scope, it's not going to check to make sure that you filled out section details in their entirety, if grouping was allowed or not based on that updated
okay.
component type selection.
Okay, so that would happen architecturally too. If I've got a not in scope and then I pick something that's in scope, but I've got a problem with a section name or something else, it could hit again.
You could choose a general that all of a sudden we're saying requires a comment and a
Right,
photo that
right,
you weren't
right.
tracking.
Got it. Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, yeah, we keep pounding that we got to run the tool multiple times because it's a little bit of a gopher game. You fix one thing, it breaks something else. So you got to keep running it through multiple times until you get it clean or clean as it can get. There's always going to be certain hits that we can have answers for, but
Absolutely.
A3 is not perfect. The idea is that any water heater under 20 gallons is not to be captured. I know that I've gone back and forth over the past couple of years, and we finally made a decision as a group and said, nope, we need to enforce one standard and one alone. So that's more of a recent update that's looking to extract the capacity. And if it's less than 20, it's just going to say delete it. We don't want it. We want to be consistent in how we present that data. Before that, though, the rule is anything below 80 gallons is to be captured as a residential. The only way to figure that out in some of these component type selections is to extract from the capacity field. So we strip the unit of measure, we look at the value, but the tool is not perfect. So as you can see, is identifying 0 because it does not see gallons, so it cannot extract a number from this logic. Here it is 80 gallons, so it extracted 80, at which point the rule is not to choose commercial, even if it's commercial, but to choose residential. So this is one that I would look at that can easily be fixed. Not that one, that one, that one.
So just change if you know it's over, so just change it to gallons and then you ain't gotta worry about this hit. Other than like tankless gas.
Other than tankless, I think, how do I answer your question, buddy?
Because tankless gas is gonna have to be NBH. There's nothing else about it.
Right.
But I'm
And
not
I
sure
don't
if
have
it
an
would hit
example
on this
here.
or not, but
Yeah, I don't either. I don't have it in the data to see it. The
Okay.
issue here is that these are commercial MBHs. The fundamental conversation of water heaters that if it's a tank, we prefer the capacity to be gallons. So this is,
Okay.
so
Now I got
therefore,
you.
this is legacy data, meaning that if you walked up to this and it was a tank, I would be asking you to change this 125 MBH to what the gallon is based on the nameplate information. And then we
Okay.
could say, well, do you strip out the useful 125 and just put gallons, or can you put both? And I think that we do accommodate for both.
Yeah,
with
the
a comma
catalog
space.
says GAL/MBH.
Yep.
So
But
would putting both satisfied, or does it, or just go with gallon and be simple and easy?
if you have gallons, I would say be consistent, be simple, be easy. If both's in there, I'm not going to fault you for it, and I would just have to. I'd want to do more testing to see how well the tool accommodates it. Or if it flags it, I would say that's a false flag. But the whole reason to come to A3 is to see, okay, this is 100 gallon. This is a quote unquote false flag.
I would keep the MBH and the gal, because if you have the MBH there, you can see if they chose the right component type.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, as long as it's mostly gases, you're gonna have the MBH, right?
Right, and you want that MBH to stay in the capacity. I would say 366 MBH, comma, whatever the gal is. Just have them both there. That way, when you're going through and you're QCing the data, you can make sure that the right component type was chosen, since they have either specific MBHs or ranges in the component type.
All right, thanks.
Any other thoughts on that from the group?
I just got hit on this, on water heaters, actually. It said, gallon or gal, comma, MBH for a water heater, commercial. And it kept hitting me on that. And I went back and looked at the component catalog. I'm not sure what was going on with that. Does that sound right? I mean,
What were the gallons?
yeah, they were over 80. I know what you're asking there, but they were over 80.
So my gut is even though that we say that it's okay to provide both, I know that this check has not been addressed in quite a while.
Okay.
So my gut is that we've never gone back, and my gut tells me that the capacity number, column I, is going to be 0 because the tool cannot extract the number value that precedes the GAL unit of measure.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then, I guess it would be anything, like you said, 80 gallons, and between 80 and 20, you said 30 or 20 gallons we're not picking up.
Anything less than 20, under 20.
Anything less than 20, we don't pick up.
Right. So if it's a 19
between,
gallon, you're
right,
deleting it. You skim
correct,
past it. Yeah.
Correct. So between 20 and 80 is supposed to be a residential unit anyway.
Correct.
And anything over 80, you're going to want to use the MBH.
I would always use gallons with the water heater if that information is available and there's a tank. And if it's a tank, you can get the gallons by measuring it and using the formula in the catalog that helps you calculate the gallons with
Sure.
the height and diameter of the
Right.
tank.
Right.
What you got, Daniel?
Well, I was just gonna ask or suggest, because yeah, we are trying to compare two different types of water heaters to the same rule. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we can make the commercial water heater capacity unit of measure check, similar to what they do for the elevators. The elevators, I think, are looking for a weight, comma, and floors. So the check is looking for both floors and pounds. So I guess I'm suggesting for commercial water heaters to have the unit of measure check for both gallons and MBH. And then also, so we know that the gallons is listed for residential. We know now the gallons would be listed for commercial, and then the check could look for whatever value is before the word gal, and flag any one for commercial that's below 80 or 81. And then residential would only have gal listed. So just update the unit of measure check first for the commercial water heaters, following the same methodology for the elevators.
Hey, Trevor, I would suggest that we table the discussion for the QC team, so we can come into an agreement on this and continue on with the training on the QC
Here,
tool.
here.
So this is water heaters, exhausted. A3. A4 did not hit. I can quickly come back to here. I'm curious what A4 is. I didn't create one of these, but here's a very simple one. No stainless sinks in the kitchen or the break room. So stainless sink is a very specific component type selection. And it's looking for it between the material category or the component type description, right? That uniformat. And if in the section name, it can identify that someone's calling out as a break room or a kitchen or something like that, that's what's driving that hit. So it's picking up on some keywords and saying that there's a contradiction, that even though it's stainless, if it's in the kitchen or the break room, there's a different component type to choose. A5 is another simple one for architecture. It's looking at curtain walls. There's text in the manual that says curtain walls don't apply to single story buildings. So simply, if the number of floors in the bread file is 1 and someone is entering the curtain wall component type, is going to throw a flag. At which point it requires more digging. Is the number of floors incorrect in the bread file? Is it a multi-story building that they got wrong? At which point team lead or someone may be needing to document a real property discrepancy as part of that. If not, then it's a conversation with QCMs on what makes it a curtain wall and not a storefront. Do we ignore this hit? Do we explain it in an inventory comment? Things like that. But a very simple check, because its number of floors is 1 in the bread file and this component type is entered in the data, it threw a flag. A6, this is a tricky one. And originally, I want to pick up on it, these general and others. And general and other can be part of a material category, or it could be part of the component type. And it's really aiming at what options continue to be vague, where there's not a more specific component type option that need clarification. And then how do you create logic to be consistent with that? I wanted to point out some terms here, or I pick up on Dutch doors, like the conversation of a standard interior door general is very vague. And per Army rules, there is no comment requirement. There obviously is no photo requirement. But there is text that says that it's beneficial to put Dutch in the section name. And where am I going to pick that up on? Maybe it's somewhere else. What am I thinking about? I am reading here that it says plastic. So if it was a plastic door, it's suggesting that the descriptive, as I've come to know it, should be put in the section name.
So, real quick. Yeah, I ran across this a few times. I've had fiberglass doors. I've also had plastic laminate covered doors. And I just still, like with the plastic laminate ones, it was a wood core. I put it in as a wood door and I just did I put it in as that with a, I can't remember if I section named it. I may have, but I put in an inventory comment that it had a plastic laminate finish. I don't know if that means anything here, but I know what you're getting at, where something will hit where you think, and I had storm doors. I didn't realize we had storm doors in here. And so I had a storm door for a screened in enclosure, put it as an other. And in fact, we have storm doors somewhere buried in there, in the, it's somewhere under there, like you said, it's in the notes or something like that, or maybe it's one of the pull downs. I can't remember, but anyway.
Storm door is a valid selection. Screen door is not. They don't want screen doors, but they do want storm doors.
What am I thinking
Right.
about though? There's a phrase in this manual that references that you should put that descriptive in a section name. It obviously is not
Let's
Dutch.
Make sure that what you put in the section name is also in the comments and they align.
I know. I was just trying to point out in the manual the one thing that I've leveraged.
Special piping.
No, that's too far. It's an architectural item that.
Well, Dutch door is the one that I think of that you just pulled up. There might be another one. I don't know.
I thought that it said that Dutch should be in the section name. It's a different
It
description.
does. It does need to be in the section. It needs to be just Dutch. Yeah. So if you pick steel door, Dutch, and then in the section name Dutch door.
I know, but I'm
You
trying
thinking
to.
about the bifold or the closet doors or something like that, Trevor? There you go.
So you put out a guidance regarding bifolds, that you did not like what was, it didn't make sense cost-wise for what was in the manual.
Yeah,
and
not
what she-
C102004. So, yes.
Yeah. That had to do with like pantry doors or bifolds at a closet or something.
I'm still not finding what I want. I apologize for.
Okay. And I
going off on a
apologize for
tangent.
taking that over. Sorry.
No. I wanted to point out that A6 leverages that. So whether the Army manual says that an inventory comment is required or not, the whole check is identifying general and others. So this is an other in the material category. Other is also the component type selection. Special piping, general. These are vague things. Standard interior doors, general. So what do? The consistency piece is we've adopted this section naming format, and the term is going to be a descriptive. The tool is looking for that descriptive, not only in the section name, but we're also asking for a comment. And when those things are in alignment, that is what satisfies A6. So someone would say, this looks fine. What's wrong with this? I have Dutch in the section name. Dutch is also found in the section comment. The issue here is the space dash space is very important per Jacob's guidelines and what we've adopted. And from a logic standpoint, we look for space dash space, at which point when I dissect the section name, everything to the left of that is going to be location information. Everything to the right is a descriptive. At which point the tool is going to be able to extract Dutch from that section name, validate that Dutch is found in the comment, dotting I's, crossing T's. That would go away.
Sounds same way, row 12 would go away if there was an inventory comment.
Yes. So this is where someone could come back and point out the Army manual, and the Army manual says that a inventory comment is not required for a standard interior door general. And I come back to say that in order to satisfy A6 so that everyone here is consistent, it's looking for a comment.
Because it went under general.
Yes,
See, I would-
because
see-
the logic identified these as these general
Yeah.
options. There's nothing more
Yeah.
specific. We're exhausting that truly is the right component type, at which point these are the two little things. And, you know, I am taking it to the nth degree. And these little things like chain link, I just saw a chain link. South fencing. The space dash space is what's throwing this one off, at which point fencing is the descriptive in the name, fencing is found in the comment. This one would be satisfied. There's a lot of hits here. And once again, this is a lot of data that we were not responsible for. So don't fault me, but if I just throw some names of where I know.
Hey, Trevor, the one for the Dutch door up there on row 12, that dash should not be there, correct? Because that entire thing is a descriptive.
Which one is it?
Row 12, Dutch metal.
It would if he picked metal instead of general. Then it would have just been section name Dutch. That's how I've done it. If it's a wood door Dutch, I would say wood door and then just section name it Dutch. But in this case, it was general.
Yep.
Yes, these are both descriptives. And this is starting to play into little things. But if I'm being simple, I pick up on Dutch is what's important. And the comment could say metal Dutch door. You know, there's no harm in the comments actually providing a little bit more information than just taking this approach of this is silly. My section name's just going to match my comment. And I know that we do that. We've adopted that for special piping, right, Dean? Propane's the name. We put propane piping in the comment. But there are other things that could be value added to better utilize a comment that I consider helpful for the next assessor as a steel plate. That's all descriptive. There is no space dash space. It's exterior closure other. The reason that it hit is because Dane steel plate, that descriptive is not verbatim found within the section comment.
And that particular, like
okay.
Nancy said on row 12, Nancy mentioned that should not be a general. That should be a metal door with the section name Dutch.
Okay.
Well, that's how I was, that's how I understood to do it, was that if it's still a wood door or a steel door, fine. But if it's Dutch, section name Dutch.
But the
And
manual has it under general.
okay,
Yes. So Jay, I think you're leveraging the fact that the keyword Dutch is
Yep.
specifically under the C102001.
Mhm.
And I do not know that our Jacobs guidance elaborates anything on identifying material, wood or metal, as Nancy is offering.
all right. Well, I didn't realize actually that part of it. So then
How
I need to
how
put
should
it,
we be
I guess I
doing it?
need to put it under general. So
How should we be doing it?
I don't know if we changed that to metal door and put Dutch. Trevor, would the QC tool hit that? I don't know if there's any check for that.
No, because metal door is going to be a more specific option. So the ask would be to put Dutch. I think Dutch is a good descriptive, but then the tool's not looking for a comment to align with it because it's a different conversation, right?
Right.
Based on the component type that was chosen as selection. And these are great rabbit holes. I mean, this is what it's come to as far as picking apart consistency. And if they're being done 3 or 4 different ways, to Javi's point, it's a small group makes a decision on what it's going to be. And if I hear wind of it, I'm going to go and put it in the QC tool, Jay. So I'm going to start thinking of Dutch. And if I can find it in a section name, if I can find it in a comment, if the answer is that it should always be under this C102001, then I'll create a check that's going to flag it if someone chooses metal or wood. But no one's told me, so it's not in play yet, but that's the potential.
I mean, if the manual says that page you're showing, then that's what it ought to be, I guess. It should go under general with wood dash or Dutch dash wood or wood dash Dutch or wood Dutch or whatever.
Once again, the section name can be simple, Dutch. That's good. The fact that I'm asking for the tool is asking for a comment, that's where you could put wood wood Dutch door, right? Give it a little bit more. There's a balance. That's all I'm getting at. And not to A6 is tricky, not to beat it too much longer, but these are all just little things. Piping is in the material category, therefore, so piping, at times we've had piping in the section name. That's not the case here. The tool is simply looking for propane in this case. If people are putting diesel and it's producing a flag, it's because this is such a general thing. To try to get some consistency, D209001, if I go to Jacob's guidance, here we already took an attempt at identifying all these possibilities, and it's like 30. So do we need to add diesel? Yet another. Right now, the answer is no. So that's where the tool would flag it. To be consistent, I would get rid of diesel in the section name. I would call it fuel oil, and then I would elaborate in the comment, you know, fuel oil piping is diesel. And then we could argue if diesel is not a fuel oil, but that's what I've been doing to satisfy. There's going to be little nuances. Not everything is a legit hit. You know, for those that have section detail requirements, when you have ID numbers that are the same thing as what the descriptive would be, it's not the intent to repeat ourselves with an extra space dash space. But the tool uses space dash space as a delimiter. So we can have as many as, in theory, 2 delimiters or 3 pieces to a section name. That being, if I just take some space, location, space dash space, ID number, descriptive for when that's required. Space dash spaces are different than dashes for those that do Windows and a dash. So these are all the little things that A6 is picking apart, and it's a conversation.
About the compressed air? Well, I just put compressed air, and it's hitting me on that.
In this data set that you're seeing, or in your
before, and you know,
you'd have to show me. I'd like to see it to better understand it. But if we're looking at this, natural gas hit because natural gas, the comments intended per the Army manual to address what type of piping is being captured, not the quantity of takeoff being formed in the field. So in this case, Ricky just missed being repetitive, but putting natural gas in his comment.
So in the section name, I put compressed air, and then in my comment, I just put compressed air piping for tools.
Okay.
For air tools. It hits
this
me
one's,
on it.
This one's probably a false hit. Maybe it aligns with something like
Okay.
this. Maybe for special piping, we're not really looking for a space dash space. So if all this piping is on the west, I think this is value added. This looks good. I would overlook it. I would say, I see natural gas, false flag. I'm moving on.
Well, in the type of piping, maybe it's looking for is the piping steel, galvanized, copper, plastic, as opposed to what it's conveying.
Right? Yeah, I think it's a great point. That the manual didn't do anything to address, right? They just show a picture of piping and say capture
Right.
special piping.
Yeah, because I would think it'd be, intuitive to think if you got a diesel tank and then there's piping on it, more than likely, if the piping's steel, it's going to be pumping diesel. And you could just put steel piping. So yes, we could pick this to get, apart for quite a while. So,
other little things. So Adriano, here we have location, but right, this is standpipe other. So what is this other, right? Expansion tank. So I get it here. So in order to satisfy that, if that was in all caps, that's
right.
These little things. That's what's satisfying A6.
Special piping in the manual says the system, not the material.
Thank you, Rand.
Roger that.
Let's see if I can't gain a little momentum. In theory, we got 25 minutes. But we have a follow-up session as well. I'm not looking to read my these descriptions verbatim. Some of these I hope are straightforward. If the section year equals the building year and the estimated box is checked, that's going to throw a flag. If there's no reason to think that that asset wasn't replaced, then it's original to the building and it's not estimated. If you don't think it's original and you're still guessing and going down the path of estimated, well, then obviously it should not be original to the building year. That's what this check's looking for. Good. Okay. A8. So anything that's within 6 years of the building year is going to throw a flag. Obviously input or estimated. Construction can take many years. There may be false flags associated with this, but generally speaking, things are not being replaced within that short of a period. Outside of carpet, in theory, has a 7-year design life if they haven't changed it.
I would say that this is something that I run into a lot, because a lot of times the buildings don't have the correct date.
But you can correct that date in bread. So if let's say the building has the wrong date, if you put the right date at the building level, then it shouldn't hit if that date matches up with your components.
Yeah. But once, but not, I'm not even sure how to say this, but sometimes when not everybody puts it in, that date never changes, or the QC engine is looking at the bread file, or I'm trying to think of
that building year in column I comes from the bread file and the date of construction of the building. So if that one was 2007, if you changed it to 2012, then it should show 2012 there. So then your component of 2012 shouldn't throw a hit because it's the same as the building. So it's not being replaced within 6 years, it's original. So that is why we say that once we determine, the team lead, we determine the building number of floors and the square footage and the building date, we can make all those changes in the bread file. Everybody should make the same changes, and that'll eliminate a lot of false hits. Because if you say it, if bread says it's 1 floor and it's obviously a 2-story building, you're going to get a ton of hits from several different checks because the floors are wrong. Same thing with the square footage and the date. Now, when we load the data into Builder, those date changes and square foot changes, if the square foot is, outside the 10%, those are real property changes that need to go back and be recorded so that they can change it on their end. But when you change it in the bread file and you run your bread file through the tool, you shouldn't see those hits, because that's where the tool is pulling that information from your bread file.
But that would just be seen from my end whenever all the files are put together.
When all the files are put together, they should all have the same date for every building, the same number of floors. And in reality, what it's going to do is when I merge the files, it's going to look at the team leads, because the updater, if you're not the team lead, now when you go into the updater, you have to check if you're the team lead or not. If you don't check that, it makes sure that none of your changes override the team lead. So whoever checks that they're the team lead, their changes to the bread file take precedence. So if they change the date and you didn't, the bread file is going to see their date. But everybody should make it the same, so that when you're running your file independently and you're doing your own QC, you're not going to get false hits if you fix the date, the square footage, number of floors. But that
Okay.
should be aligned with the team lead, and all team members should have the same information for every building.
And I'm listening to a conversation where when those come across, like everyone is slowing down because that's information that needs to be shared. Everyone needs to be on the same page. The point being that when you make those type of changes, it needs to be shared with site coordinator and such. Those are things to be documented through that avenue, as well as the information has to be right in the bread file for the QC tool to produce good hits. The other little things from this one, for those that do, when you can find nameplate information, date manufactured, if it's not 1-1, like I see this and I'm gaining confidence that nope, that's actually 81. I'm not asking for a comment, but we are putting the comment field visible through this perspective in the event that somebody wants to elaborate on what's making something unique in one-offs, because as a very general conversation, typically we wouldn't expect to see replacement in that short period of time. That's all. And I'm seeing little things. You change an acquisition date. When I saw strip footing and things, and you're fighting over 2 years, 95 versus 93, those are kind of moot points. Strip footing is where I first saw that.
Now,
But if
there
the
is
Army
some logic. Trevor, correct me if I'm wrong. There is some logic that looks for addition in the section name, correct?
I think you're right, but still, if it's with, A10 speaks to if that addition's within 25 years, it doesn't want a slab on grade, but then it doesn't say anything anywhere else. So another slippery slope when it comes to additions.
Yeah.
And how to truly
Yeah.
address it. Are they treating it as an addition, or are they still looking at it from an Army standpoint as that is just a single building that took a few extra years to finish out? And some of those are just the team, the QCM, everyone needs to slow down and talk through it and determine what is the best answer approach in that circumstance. Nancy.
Well, I was just going to say that I think A8 would be worth a further down the road conversation to have, honestly, because it does make a difference. These guys have dates on their equipment, and if you're talking 4, 5, 6 years or something, and the building was built in such, we do not typically change dates in bread for a building built. We will change square footages because they might have taken the roof only or included the dock or something like that, but we do not typically change dates of when the building was built. We put in there a renovation or added electrical in 2012, 6 years down the road or something like that. Anyway, that's all I was going to say. It might be worth down the road having a further conversation regarding this. I think that is kind of something that would be very helpful for all of us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
A9 did not produce any hits here because if you recall, if we go back here, it did not run to completion. I just want to share with the group, A9 has turned into a catch-all. There's all this independent logic that has been put into A9. I want to show that I've done it, made an attempt at documenting. It looks like it goes through number 11, but if you come up here and actually expand the top, apparently in Excel, you can max out a row height. So it actually goes all the way up into the 20s. Little things from spelling out, it's going to flag you for mechanical, electrical, and communication because the manual says those are the only 3 terms that we want abbreviated, mech, elect, com. Break room versus break room, variants in the same word, chain link, chain dash link. Like these are just one-offs, right? Fiberglass shingles versus asbestos shingles. So the thing here is that if A9 hits, don't ignore it. You can't get any information by looking at an eyes-on review and thinking that it's going to tell you what's wrong with it. You have to go to the stored procedure. This is a very weak example, but A9 has baked in QC comments. So if something hits, there's going to be a comment to give you an explanation as to why it's hitting it. Does that make sense?
Okay.
I like that. comment.
You have
thing
you
right
have
there.
to come here. And this one's, it doesn't help when I just showed you that we have like 30 catch-all and I can only show you one. And in this case, you had the IC things that it's looking for the timestamp and the actual comment. The updater tool would have fixed it. I didn't have a better example in the allotted time. I think I tried one other report. I'll open it real quick. But pushing that consistency. If it comes up one time, I don't want to try to remember it, and I don't want others to have to, how do I disseminate it? In my mind, if it gets baked into the QC tool, it's there for all of us to be held to that rule. I'm just quickly opening one other. Once again, not a lot of help, but soffit, it obviously doesn't like metal, considers it general. We could say that metal should be accepted. We go and update the logic. This goes away. So there's still judgment and discretion. The concrete, this whole cast in place and cast dash in place, that stuff, trying to be consistent. It's referenced in the Jacobs guidance. This is just doing its part to try to enforce it. Here's your chain link variants, and we chose one to go with. That's telling you exactly what it is. In this case, chain link, being one word, is the preferred. And I think that's still the case. So that's A9.
Hey, Trevor, I got a quick question for Justin while we're all sitting here. Justin, when we start talking about real property changes, which would include square foot changes outside the 10%, number of floors, building construction date, those are things that we need to report as real property changes, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And yeah, I
Now,
would
when we-
encourage everybody to be making those changes in your bread file. So yeah, if the year is not accurate, of course, mention it in the building level comment, but change the year at the facility level in Builder, in your bread file. Same as number of floors, building square footage. If any of that is inaccurate, mention it in the building level comment, but also change it in the bread file, because that gives us something to look back on and compare the real property information from before we started our assessment and look at the real property, those values after the assessment, and we can identify all of those discrepancies that way in case, something was not reported up to the site manager or site coordinator.
Say we change a date on a building that's got it in as 1990 and we change it to 1991. We load the data. Eventually that's going to get reverted unless they accept the real property change, correct?
Exactly. Yes, it will eventually. If they don't change their real property record, it'll get overwritten during the next real property top load. But yeah, I think it's still important to change it so that not only the QC tool is satisfied in that moment, but like I say, again, we have those values to compare before and after and tell them, hey, make sure you change your real property record so that, you continue to have accurate data in Builder.
I know in the past, we had a rule that assessors were not supposed to change those numbers in the bread file, but we've since overridden that rule to allow them to change it so that the tool runs correctly, knowing that if it does not get accepted at some point in Builder, it's going to get reverted if we don't report those as changes and they don't get accepted. But from an assessor standpoint, you make it correct in the bread file. All assessors on the team should make the floors and the square footage if it's outside of 10%, and the building date should all be correct in that bread file. And then when you run the tool, when you won't see a lot of hits that are related to those metrics.
Right.
And I want to stress the importance of that team lead QC group. Like, that is building comment worthy stuff. That is the spot to document it so that when it does revert back, we all have something to go back to, read and understand what that value should be.
Yeah, exactly. And I know, just going back real quickly to that 10% variance on the building square footage, I know that was something that's normally been included in our contracts, as that's kind of the threshold that we're contractually obligated to report. But I would almost argue that I'd still like to see area corrected, even if it's not outside of the 10%. Because if you change something, let's say you've got a 10,000 square foot building, but your architect says, no, it should be 10,500 square feet. That's less than the 10%. But then if everybody's using, 10,500 for branch wiring and ground for, everything else that relies on the building square footage, then you may have an inconsistency if it's not changed at the facility level. So
The only thing
yeah.
that I would say to that, Justin, is, we go out there and we measure these buildings. We're not exact. And what happens
Sure.
is one team goes out there and measures it. Say the bread file says it's 10,000 square feet. One team goes out there, measures it, says it's 10,500. A couple years later, we go back, they measure it, they say, no, it's 10,100. I mean, I think that was the genesis of the 10% rule, is it needs to be significant enough. Otherwise, the number is going to be constantly changing because you're measuring things that are not to the gnat's ass out there.
Yes, I got you. That does make sense. So then I would say the responsibility falls back on the team lead to determine if that square footage that they measured, if it's within 10%, then stick with the value that's currently in builder. And if it's outside, then you note it in the building level comment and change it in your bread file and make sure the rest of your team changes it in their bread files. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yep.
so we've been noting that in our spreadsheet, or at least the teams that I've been on, is to make sure that if there's a change in either number of floors, or square foot of the, or not year, or square foot of the building, to put it in there and make sure that everybody changes that in their building level data to reflect the updated whatever. Yeah, I
Yep.
get what you're saying.
Correct. So now it's just, there's the extra ask of verifying that that change is greater than or less than 10% before changing it and directing your team to change it. All right, thank you.
Dean, you want to do A10?
A10, hold on.
Cost validation. It was a perspective that you had.
Right. One of the things that I did is look based on the building and the building value, the PRV, did I have components that looked like it was way outside of the building value? Now that's more valid for larger buildings. Where you end up with some weird numbers is when, say, you've got a small building that has something like a big switchgear in it or something. For what's in the building is worth more than the rest of the building combined. So once you get down into small buildings, you're going to see a lot here. But what this helped me find is things that where somebody had added an extra zero in a quantity, so that the exterior walls in a normal size building were way in excess of what you would expect to see. And it's easier to see that sometimes from the quantity, sometimes you notice it easier in the cost. So when they're smaller buildings, you're going to get a lot of false hits. But once a building gets to a normal size of 5,000 or so square feet, you do pick up on some quantity errors here. And some of it is just costing in builder, like grounding is always really high. As soon as I see grounding, I don't worry about it. A lot of the superstructures seems to run high in comparison to the rest of the building. So I just spent some time going through looking for common errors in quantities that throw these numbers way outside of what I would expect to see, where you got a building that's worth $1 million and you got one component that's worth $1.5 billion. And I think we set it at what, 10% of the building value or something like that.
Well, it produces it. So if it's greater than 10%, yes, that's just an arbitrary number. It's looking to look at an individual component. It's also looking, well, how many of those components exist. So it adds those up within every respective building. Steve?
One of the things that I found that hit a lot was I think there's mechanical system other or something in there that got used for some small components, and those are like several $100,000 each. So that was throwing some numbers way out. So we had to go back and change those to something else.
So let's go back to this spreadsheet for a moment. I do know which spreadsheet you're talking about, but I had no idea about this spreadsheet till I got on National Guard, and somebody says, well, we got to fill out the spreadsheet. And I'm like, what spreadsheet? So I don't know when this started and who started it and who put that out, but I had no idea about this spreadsheet and who was doing it and how we were doing it. And this is one of the complaints that I talked to Ralph about. Somebody comes up with this stuff and puts it out, and not everybody hears about it. Lori doesn't know about this spreadsheet.
What spreadsheet?
There you go.
Are you talking about
Talking about
A10?
talking about the one that we have under the Bread Zero folder that we started
Oh,
back.
the assessor building notes?
Yes, the assessor building notes.
Got it. Okay.
And right, I think that and understandably so. So we ended up with a team, Steve and Teresa, and they're clueless on this because they were out there for QC. So that's very understandable, and that's
Yeah, that's a bigger conversation and animal than
yep, that's
a
that's,
QC tool.
Well, we're on that subject, and while you got everybody on the phone, let's talk about that spreadsheet so nobody's in the dark, please.
that's probably another conference call, but I'm cool with that. It's under the zero folder.
We can just show everybody where it is, because, like I said, had no freaking idea. Lori didn't either.
This has only come about in the last few months.
Came about on rebaseline and the need for there to be a common ground for assessors to be able to document, see, get information. Depending on who a team lead was, some experienced, this is a lot of Nancy's spreadsheet that's been tailored. I know that Ben Lopez had one that he was doing. I know that Daniel, when he was in the field more so and a team lead, he was sending stuff out, and it was an attempt to try to get a standardization and a common user experience has been my take on it, being part of rebaseline. And I that's all I can speak to. It's been perceived really well. The feedback I heard was that it actually lessened the burden of team leads. Finding the spot for this file to be located, where does that go? The history behind it, I once tried the 2 folder and I hated it because I had auto notifications and I was getting bombarded with emails. So it was, hey, let's put it in the 0 folder. It's kind of bread file, assessor team related. It's an adoption. Some have been exposed to it, some haven't. We could all do better at sharing some of this information and getting it adopted.
I think what my point is a lot of us didn't know this thing even existed. And if you're not on that project, if Lori gets called in or I get called in or somebody gets called in to QC, if you're not in that group, you don't have access to that spreadsheet. Correct?
Once you get accepted to that Teams, it's located on Teams. So if someone's sending you on a project, it's that PM or whoever, site coordinator, someone that has the permissions of that team site to give you permission to the site. Now, the dissemination to know that this is where it should be located for every single project. This is how it should be built. I argue that the column headers and the colors, everything should be the same so that no matter what project you get put on, you're used to what you're seeing, what you're responsible for filling out.
Look, this is, let me just say this real quick. This is no different than what we used to talk to everybody out there. Team lead used to walk around and go, give me your missing systems. Tell me this and that. You got any, email it to me, blah, 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 blah. So it was more like just put it in the spreadsheet. And if you put it there, so it's no different than any team lead would have anyway, except that it was more or less lessening the, oh, that's right, I forgot to call Nancy or email her about, you need to just fill this out. And if you didn't, there's a blank there, for your missing systems. That's really all it was. It wasn't a secret, thing. It was more like, how do you guys keep track of this? And then Trevor was talking to John Harvey and to me and to Ben Lopez, and we all had ways of, well, here's how I do it. So they made this. It's not there's nothing in here that you probably aren't putting in your brain already. It's just an easier way to keep track of it. That was more or less anyway.
No, I mean,
we should probably
fine with
address it.
but people need to know that it exists and what's going on. When I went up to do National Guard, I had no idea. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. If we're going to do that, that's fine, but it needs to be put out there for everybody and know that it even exists.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sorry, Steve, just reiterating what Nancy said. I think it was always the expectation that the team lead shares this information with the team. So it's not like a new process or new set of rules or anything that came along. This was just a way of, documenting it. I think that this is based on a workbook that Nancy has been using as team lead, just personally herself for a long time.
No,
So-
I got all that. But what I'm saying is nobody, some of us didn't even know about it, didn't know that it existed. And just now, like Perry Jones says, new to me. I mean, I'm just saying when we do this
It's something, Steve, that we need.
it needs to be put out
add
so
to
everybody
our
knows that it exists
Jacob's
and
guidance.
it's working. That's all.
It's something that we need to add to our Jacob's guidance. And that's not updated real time. So the next time that we put one out, we can probably address it. But it's evolved over time. I mean, from different projects, like we said, everybody had different ways of doing it. Some people had spreadsheets. It used to be that we told everybody not to edit the building comment except for the team lead, and the team lead was responsible for the building comment. But then we had situations where different assessors were assuming different dates for renovations and things like that, and whether there was addition or not. So what this does is it allows the team lead, because they don't see everybody else's data. So it allows them to see where somebody else is calling out a renovation in a certain year that they were unaware of, so that when they get ready to do their building comments, they can leverage everybody else's input to come up with one master comment. And at one time, we changed it and said, okay, everybody can edit the building comment, and then QC will come behind, look at everybody's building comment, so that when we run the program that merges all the files, it listed all assessors. So we would have 4 building comments in there, and it was the QC's role to collaborate and consolidate those into one comment. That became too much of a lift for QC. So we threw it back onto the teams and said that it's the team lead's responsibility to take that file, look at everybody's input, come up with one master building comment and put that in their file. And then the updater, if you don't select team lead, it ignores your building comment. So it only takes the team lead's building comments, because that should be the master. So at that point, if somebody, say Adriano, says that the electrical system was completely renovated in 1980, and Nancy's out there and she's saying there were no renovations, when she looks at that sheet, Adriano should have put something in there about that 1980 renovation, and she can update hers, so that when now we're looking at the data and we see a bunch of panels and wiring and everything that's 1980, it explains it.
Exactly. This was more of a CYA, honestly, for the team lead to be able to not have to sit there and keep after everybody. Not that that's, everybody's got their thing to do, but it's like remembering that, did I get all your, okay, renovations? Did you, oh, no, wait, I just realized this was redone and there it is. It's there, put it in there. And when you sign off on it, you're done. It's done. When you tell me you're done with that spreadsheet, that's it. And
I don't think anybody really has an issue with the spreadsheet. I think the issue is that not everybody knew it was there.
Well, and we kind of started this over re-baseline because things got a little crazy. And so it kind of developed and now it's become a full-blown, why didn't we know about this? Well, because I don't know, here we are. Now it's only been a few months and it's like, well, is it working or is it not working? And I guess I don't know. Is it working or not? I guess that's the question.
It's working.
JT, you've politely had your hand raised. I'm assuming to let us know that we're past hour and a half. And then Daniel, you also have your hand raised. So
Yeah, mine is to let us know this is a great conversation. I just want to respect everybody's time who can't stick around for it. I was going to just thank everybody for coming. I think we had 80% attendance based on who was invited versus who came, so that's outstanding. And for those of you who had folks, if you have subordinates, if you're a people leader and they weren't able to show up, just encourage them to watch the recording. I'm about to stop the recording and the conversation can continue. I just want to make sure there's no one who feels they can't leave because it's still going on, because we're officially past the time. So I'm going to stop the recording, and Daniel, I think you had a question.
Yeah, it was just like a couple comments about these spreadsheets. Yeah, I know we've all been using, or some of us have been using different formats of this. Last that I remember, we talked about this on like a QC